come by information too in the abstract. We don't really get all of the details. So it's important for us to really know exactly what is going on when these issues do arise. And then, of course, we thought it was important for you to hear too, or see, those you hadn't, the ABC program that took place on the 2nd of May on This Week with David Brinkley, where Cokie Roberts, who is a graduate of Wellesley, and Sam Donaldson and George Will and David Brinkley spoke derisively of Dr. Martin without ever mentioning his name, but made some very stupid comments and very, very unknowledgeable about what, first of all, Dr. Martin is all about, and what the whole subject that we're talking about, what that actually entails. Those of you who attended the trial of Jeffries versus Halston, that was won with a total victory that pointed out all that we have been saying all along about the lack of information that the people who control these institutions have in regard to the subject that they're supposed to be dealing with when it comes to African studies. The fact that Halston, the former president of the college, or Ann Reynolds, or Pfeffer, or any of the others who were brought to testify in defense of City College knew little or nothing about black studies, African studies, or whatever, is enough to tell us that they are not in a position to really judge our people. But one of the things that really hurts us, even in this victory, that the whole thing has to be fought under First Amendment rights. In that, because of the First Amendment, that we have the right of freedom of expression, academic freedom, and also because of the racial component in this situation too, that they would actually introduce the 14th Amendment, which is one of the things that they concluded had also been violated in regards to Dr. Jeffries. The point is that we already knew that we could get by, or we would win a particular argument based on the First Amendment, because Michael Levin had already won that by the same judge, Judge Kenneth Conboy. And although we didn't like what Michael Levin said, we understood the particular notion about academic freedom and a person, particularly in academia, having an opportunity to say almost anything that they want. But what we're talking about here is something different. Well, we're talking about the right to tell the historical truth, because what we're saying is more than just to talk about academic freedom. We're talking about, we want to go to the substance of the question. We want to talk about veracity and mendacity. We want to talk about truth, and we want to talk about lies. We want to talk about what is revisionist history. Is it the history that had been left out or obscured before, and now there's an attempt to bring it back, and then people who have fabricated their own history, stolen things from everybody else and adapted it for their own, and then when we try to change that, to alter that, they claim that we are revising the system, that we're talking about political correctness at all. What we're saying is that in the case of both Leonard Jeffries and Dr. Tony Martin, that the reason why they introduced particular ideas and information in books, not because they were trying just to be plain provocative, but because they knew that the information that they were putting out was essentially true, that it had been substantiated. Even when Molefi Asante, Dr. Molefi Asante, you saw in his tape, although he would not deal directly with the question about scholarship and about, which left a big cloud over, some of the things that we're trying to say here. The fact that he even pointed out that whenever Len Jeffries speaks, that he always brings a ton of books, so to speak, to document everything that he's saying. So we know that historically we're on good ground. And we also want to say that the actual monopolizing of words and the whole configuration of history the way it is today is something that we have to deal with. We have to be talking about why is it that our people have a lack of knowledge of self, and why is it that in the particular institutions that they have not been productive. We have not been able to get the type of caliber of person that should be really espousing a articulate history of themselves and that kind of pride and dignity. And if that's not the case, then why not? Why is it that, who is responsible? Who controls the educational system? Who controls all the means of propagating images? Because if you wanted to talk just about, the thing about the movies we realized that when Neil Gabler wrote his book, An Empire of Their Own, how the Jews invented Hollywood, he didn't say how the rich Jews, he didn't say how the Texas Jews, he didn't say how the Berlin Jews, he said how the Jews. That's all. That was very, very expansive. Something that Dr. Jeffries did not do in his talk. But even now that Neil Gabler, after seeing how he documented the fact that these people who ran Hollywood had to be held responsible for the images that came out of that, he's now trying to refute Dr. Jeffries from using that book. But I will also direct him to even a more scholarly work than Neil Gabler's, Irving Howe's The World of Our Fathers. Irving Howe is one of the most prolific Jewish writers who just died last week. And in that particular book, he went into the whole thing about Hollywood and about all of these Russian Jews and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer and Fox and all of the other people who we can name, and we will before this night is out. And he also pointed out how they manipulated, the images. He goes into detail about the whole thing about how Al Jolson used blackface, and Eddie Cantor, and how Sophie Tucker, all these people who they produced and made through the movies, who her title was the manipulator of coon melodies, because she was supposed to be singing like a black person. I mean, he really goes into it. He even goes into the whole shaping up of the Jewish gangster, how Jews helped to organize crime. Not just the Meyer Lansky's, but all his predecessors. So the fact is that we know that this thing can be documented, and we're not saying that any one person should be held, accountable. When we first started to give support in what we're doing for the Palestinians, and saying that, look, the Palestinians also have a case as far as that piece of territory in the so-called Middle East, a geographical political geographical terminology that's used for other purpose other than history. The fact is that Jewish supporters or allies or friends all started to say, well, you can't actually support the Palestinians because after all, they're Arabs, and the Arabs were involved in the slave trade, and you should denounce the Arabs. So we denounce Arabs for slavery. We have picketed the Sudanese mission some years ago over that issue. We have actually denounced the Mauritanians today. I mean, the people who are dealing with slavery in Africa today, we constantly do that. But they say, well, what about the Africans? You people are so Afrocentric, you're so much into Africa. What Africans actually sold, Africans? And we said any African who was involved in that, we denounce them. We are denouncing everybody. We denounced the Pope, the Catholic Church. The Pope at least apologized. The other people, whether the Baptists, the Christians, Protestants, whatever, all of them have, admitted their particular involvement. But after all of the people in the world who have been involved in slavery and who we have denounced, when we say that they have been involved, but we want to tell you about somebody else who's also involved, and that is that, do you know that your people were involved? And then all hell breaks loose. Oh, no, we can't say that. Well, why can't we say that? If that's an accurate statement, and if you really talk about the history of this country and what it has done to us and what imperialism, colonialism, slavery has done to Africa, then we think it's very, very important. Or we can look back last year to a group that tried to give a program in Brooklyn, a black group, and call it a Black Holocaust, that Jewish groups intervened and stopped the program unless the word Holocaust was removed. They could not have the program in that school unless the word Holocaust was not involved, because the Holocaust, they say, refers directly to what happened in Germany. But what Holocaust is a term that goes back to the old Latin and the Greek. It's holos, whole, and custon, burn. It means whole burn. And that means that anybody who is actually, people who have been consumed by fire, or been just wiped out, that's what it applies to. It could apply to the Armenians in 1915 when they were actually victimized by genocide by the Turks. It, of course, could apply to our situation, which was far greater than any of these other things, even if you add them all together. And you could go on and on. Of course, it applies to what happened in the Second World War. But the biggest victims of the Second World War was the Soviets, who lost 22 million people on the battlefield, and then also because of the Nazis. And we never hear about that, or the Romanians and other people who actually were wiped out. So we feel that that alone is enough to tell us that somebody is playing games. If you start to talk about the idea of anti-Semitism, you have to then find out who is a Semite. And we know that the term Semite or Semitic, it refers to a linguistic grouping. It does not have a racial, biological identity with it. And when you look at all the languages that they talk about, some of the languages are from Africa, some are from Asia, but there's none like Yiddish. Yiddish is not, a Semitic language, And when we realize that you read the Encyclopedia of Russia, just in passing, they tell you that in the 8th and 9th century, the Khazars in Khazaria, up in the Caucasus Mountains, converted to Judaism. So that would show you the introduction of where the European Jews, particularly those Russian Jews that we have so much problem with, whether it's in Crown Heights or anywhere else, or say even in South Africa, particularly those from Lithuania. So the fact is we know that we're on firm ground. And what we want to do this evening is to actually go into that and to really launch a campaign around the issues of, ongoing issues, say, of Dr. Jeffries, but more so to deal with this whole thing that happened with Dr. Tony Martin. It also unites in another thing because there are differences of opinion about how we should resolve our problem in the community. But one of the things that when the secret relationship between blacks and Jews first came out, we were among the first people to say that book is accurate. In fact, some of the brothers from the Nation of Islam was right here in one of our programs and asked us about it, and we said we support the book. The book is based on compiling the words of various Jewish people who were involved or who knew the involvement and spoke to it. Lenny Brenner, who is a Jewish anti-Zionist who has been here, spoken to many programs and written 4 books on the issues of the Jewish experience and very strong on the question of blacks and Jews, he reviewed the book for the Amsterdam News. And of course he caught a lot of problems. One of the reasons why they were so mad at Tatum the other day was because of letting people like Lenny Brenner have access to the pages where he could actually show the contradiction within Jewish society and how they impact on black people. So we're not running, in a situation where we don't know what we're talking about. And what we want to do is to establish, a very strong defense around Brother Tony Martin, who is somebody who's very dear to us. I first met Tony in 1976 when I was speaking in Brooklyn, and he was also scheduled to speak. And after I had spoken first, he brought me this book and showed me Race First, the ideological and organizational struggles of Marcus Garvey and the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And I just flipped through it, and right away, just by flipping through it, I could see that this was a book that was on the money, and we struck up a friendship from there. And then on we had the 20th anniversary, I believe it was, of AJazz in August of 1976, and we invited him down to introduce him to the Harlem community. And since the time that he wrote that book, he's gone on to establish himself as the foremost authority or scholar on Marcus Garvey. So when Cokie Roberts makes some stupid statement that she made just there, and George Will, we can just laugh. But we're laughing to a smaller audience of the people who heard that propaganda go out, and that's what we have to struggle against. The fact is that this is not the first time that it's happened. In 1985, you may remember that a good friend, Dr. Fred Dubé from South Africa, a member of the African National Congress who was teaching at Stony Brook, he ran into the same block. What did he do? He did something very similar to what Tony is accused of doing. What Fred Dubé did was that in his course, he has a theory, and he is a professor of cognitive psychology. He has this theory, that we use to, debate all the time, of what he calls reactive racism. That means that people who have been victimized by racism, they in turn, because of the imposition of racism on them, they can then start to take in some of those kind of characteristics and then express racist feelings themselves. Now, of course, we don't like to go in that because we start to go in about what racism really is and the kind of power and leverage that you have to have. But nevertheless, it was his theory. And the students were free to discuss the particulars of that particular thesis or that premise, and then to either refute it or to actually join in and to try to support it. Well, the black students went along with their assignment. They did what they were supposed to do. But the Jewish students, they became offended because among the things that he called reactive racism was Zionism. He said that based on the fact that people have said that Zionism, the UN has said that in 1975, that Zionism is racism, that therefore they had to explore that. And that's when all hell broke loose there. They put so much pressure on Dr. Dubé that he was forced to finally leave the university and take up residence elsewhere, all the way to Washington State, where I talked to him the other night prior to the decision coming down for Leonard Jeffries. I called him to brief him on what was happening with both Leonard Jeffries and with Tony Martin. And he sent his support to both of them. He said, at least I'm out here, I'm not being harassed by these people because there are very few of them here. But the fact is that we can't continue to operate like that. Dr. Dubé should be here in New York teaching, and he has a case, but he has not had the luck or he has not had the opportunity to have his case brought to trial like was done with the particular skill of Joseph Fleming, an attorney that not many people have heard about, but an attorney who, if he gets into court with the real case he wants to deal with, and that is the curriculum of inclusion, we are sure to win that one too. So we're here to stand with our brothers, and we say that they can't just split us because the book came from the Nation of Islam. We may have differences in particular about how we see things as far as the African community, but in this particular issue, we are unified on the fact that the historical department of the Nation of Islam, and I talked to Brother Alan X, who I understand had a great deal to do with organizing that project when I was in Wellesley a couple of weeks, because Minister Don Muhammad had told him to come to see me to talk about this. And we agree, you know, that this book cannot be just flaked off. They said it has no author, you know, because it has no byline. But neither does the Bible. The Bible don't have no bylines. I mean, the Bible don't have no, you know, we don't know who wrote the Bible, you know. They got a bunch of people they call prophets in there, you know. Then they have King James, he's interfering with it. So the thing is that we're not going to let that go by. By putting it as a collective work, it showed the African-centered African orientation, because we often do that. We do things from the collective. This individualism usually comes from the European culture, and we're not uptight about that, because the people who are writing in that book, we feel that they have been pretty accurate telling the story themselves. They didn't do that to debase, you know, people who were Jewish who was involved in slavery. They just was honest enough and principled enough to write it down. And we just have to be advanced enough to be able to read what they wrote down, and that's where we have a beef. And we're not going to let anybody get off the hook. First of all, when you start talking about the Holocaust, you start talking about, you know, who suffered. Most of the time, whether it's in Crown Heights or any other places, when the Jewish establishment makes a charge against us, whether it's Minister Farrakhan saying something about the religion, that the way they have actually expressed it as a gutter religion or dirty religion, where you want to play with words, whichever, whether it's Jesse Jackson talking about Hymietown, they never let you get away. They could dog you to the very end. The fact is, though, and you really look at this, that what they're saying about our people, whether it's, again, Crown Heights or just New York City or anywhere else, is that what could be construed as intemperate remarks they don't like. The people who were in Crown Heights, some youth or agent provocateur who said something about Heil Hitler, those people are totally ignorant of what Hitler was all about, and they would never have said that. None of us here support Hitler. And no one thinks that Hitler was really great. In European culture, for his advances, they thought he was great enough to be able to almost take over the world. Fact is, though, that when you look at what is going on with the Holocaust Museum that was built right here in the United States, our tax money, and had nothing to do with the United States. You see, the fact is that their Holocaust happened in Germany. Ours happened here. Theirs was done by Nazis. Ours was done by Democrats and Republicans. That's who's responsible for our thing. And the fact is that when you really look at this thing, we said they did not officially build a monument to the African Holocaust per se, but in reality they did. And the name of the monument that they built for the African Holocaust is called the United States of America. That's the memorial, that's what that is about. And we're saying that if that is the case, then what needs to be done is the whole case of reparations is very much integrally involved in this, and that's one of the reasons why, and I know Dr. Garvey will get into this a little bit later, that's one of the reasons why they have a big problem. So we're here today, you know, African nationalists, activists of all sorts, Nation of Islam, Representative Minister Conrad Muhammad is here, Assistant to Mr. Farrakhan, Khalid Muhammad is here, and I don't know if Alan X, but Alan X is coming down. They told me they were coming down also, but that's not, the point is that we're here together to deal with this particular subject. We're not backing off of this issue. We're not going to back off. And the thing is that we got to step to them on this one. The only way to deal with this and get rid of it once and for all, so it never is raised again. Whenever they raise it up, they know, don't do that, because we started something. When they attacked Brother Tony, they didn't know that Tony was also a publisher and an attorney. And when he couldn't get his, no response from them, they would not let him speak in his own defense. He fired up a thing called Broadside Number 1. How many people saw Broadside Number 1? Well, they talk about Broadside Number 1 more than they talk about the secret relationship now, because they didn't expect to get nothing like that, and they're hoping that Broadside Number 2 never comes. But we're waiting for it, because there'll be Broadside Number 2 and Number 3 until we really settle this question. And we also got to put it on black leaders here that they got to deal with it. No longer. It's funny that the Satmar Hasidim out there in Williamsburg can say more about Israel than can any black leader. They say that Israel is a satanic work. That according to the Torah, that Israel was not supposed to come into fruition until the Messiah comes. Now, even though over there in Crown Heights, Rabbi Mendel Schneerson thinks he's a Moshiach. He's supposed to be the Messiah. That's why he can go around running over little children and don't have to look back, because he thinks he's God, you see? But the point is that what we're saying is that we're not going to allow this thing to develop that way. And so, with that, we will give you the first speaker this evening, Brother Robert Asamendices Harris from the African National Construction Movement, who collaborated recently with Dr. Tony Martin in producing the first book on Carlos Cooks. And that was, that Tony saw that was very important to put that in the line of the chronicle line of development of the ideas of Marcus Garvey to the present time. And therefore, we feel that that too had something to do with their kind of, being very much upset with Tony Martin. Because remember that when Garvey was on trial, Judge Julian Mack, big-time NAACP person and a Jewish activist, at the second week, he told the court, both the defense and the prosecutor attorney, to speed up the trial, because he had to make an international Jewish meeting in Chicago by the third week. He told him that, look, this trial's taking too long. This case the man's taking too much time trying to build his case. I got to be at an international Jewish meeting. That was the judge. No, if we want to go into some stuff now, we'll find out who got the case, and when we present the case to our people, we think we won't have no problem with this anymore. So at this particular time, let me introduce you once again to Brother Robert Asamendices Harris, Administrator of the African National Construction Movement.
Thank you, Brother Ilambe. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and children. It's indeed a pleasure to be here tonight dealing with this subject. As a matter of fact, I'm glad to see the Jews make these blunders like they are doing. It caused us to come together. And we are here, as we should be here, black, Africans of all religious, political, and nationalities. In that's compulsory if we are going to go to any type of freedom, any type of progress. Being a militarist, I do know that you are not going to win a war unless you can get superior firepower or superior position. And our enemy, the African nationalists, are clear who the enemy is. The enemy is the European. He is the criminal that stole us. And that is one crime that he could never be forgiven of. We as nationalists, we don't usually divide them as Jews or Gentiles. We put all the criminals in one boat and put a band on all of them. We know that we have some qualified historians here. Brother Tony Martin could amply speak for himself. But it's indeed a pleasure to come and speak on this brother's defense, because he has been sacrificing his time and his energy speaking on our defense. As Lumby alluded, he is the leading scholar on Marcus Garvey. And to me, this statement might not rub with a lot of you, but Marcus Garvey's name is more revered to me than all the gods, the prophets, and all the other people that ever lived in this world. Mr. Garvey called for the universal unity of all Africans. To take that unity and free every African man, woman, and child on the face of this earth. Call for us to redeem our homeland, Africa. Not Harlem, Brooklyn, Bronx, or Trinidad, but Africa. And that we should use Africa for its historical greatness, as well as its natural resources and raw material. That is our heritage. That belongs to us. And we need not talk about the Jews of yesterday. We can talk about the criminals of today. And because, you know, I don't like being robbed and being misused. If the rest of you do, I just don't share that with you. And as I wake up in the morning, being an African, living in an African community, and I goes up on the streets and I look up on my community, and the most important thing in any community is its commerce, business life, and body politics. Who's in charge of our commerce, business life, and body politics? The criminal, the Jew. He is a criminal today, not talking about slavery, he's a criminal today. We are talking about rights. We have a right to survive. We have a right to live in dignity. We have the right to live on the same moral and equal plane of all other human beings in this world. And New York City is a fine laboratory to examine, to see how all people live who are free and dignified. And as we look upon the New York scene with its cosmopolitan society, with all its various racial and ethnic groups, we see that the Jew in his community, he owns and controls all of the commerce, business life, and body politics in his community. Everything is kosher, you know. The Italian, he owns the predominant interest of the commerce, business life, and body politics in his community. So with the German, the Irish, and a large extent the Latinos. But when it comes to the African, whether it's in Harlem, Brooklyn, Bronx, Staten Island, Georgia, Texas, Senegal, the Ivory Coast, Namibia, it is that one same criminal depriving us of that natural and legal right to be the owners and dominators of our commerce, business life, and body politics. And in most cases, it is the Jew. Now, I don't work for him, and I have never wanted to work for him, and I'm too old to want to work for him now, so I have nothing to gain by anything he might do. So I'm not seeking any favors to him, and whether he like what I say or not, let him do whatever he gonna do about it. Because I don't like being robbed by Jew, Gentile, Indian, Chinaman, Malayan, or even a low-life nigger. We don't want to be robbed. We don't want to be exploited. And that's what this is all about. It's about these crazy white people thinking that they own everybody and everything, thinking that they have a monopoly on intelligence. They can tell you what is right and what is wrong, that the earth belongs to them and all that's in it. But the mere fact that you're living in a land that you call America, you know that's a lie. America is a cracker. This is the native land of the red, indigenous people. A bunch of white criminals came over here and usurped these people's land and named it after one of his criminal kind. And went stole you and I and made us develop it for him, and has brainwashed us that we more in love with his stolen land than he is. You hear the Negro say, we got to make America work. The cracker says, working all right for me. All this gold and diamond and power we got, it wasn't designed to be for you. And why should you turn your back on your legal heritage, which would give you 1,000 times more reward by rejoining the large mass body of your race on your continent, joining with them in the reclamation and restoration and reconstruction of that land for Africans, as Mr. Garvey said, Africa for the Africans, those at home and those abroad. That here you are debating with a criminal that has misused you consistently for 400 years. Now, the world knows that it's something got to be wrong with your brains. Because 400 years is long enough to know if you are to know. And if there's any human relationship supposed to be worked out between black and white, Jews and blacks, 400 years, you know, we've been locked up in this criminal land. If it was any good intentions on the part of those criminals, we would have worked it out by now. You know, we wouldn't be under the bottom rung of the economic, social, and political ladder. History don't record us as that being that type of people. But thanks to people like Brother Tony Martin and Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Clarke, and our other outstanding historians, the young people are being given a chance to learn who they are, where they came from. And with to summarize it, because I know the historians will carry this on, we know that we're the aristocracy of the human race. That every expression of human expression, regardless of what race they are, they're only duplicating what we did thousands and thousands of years before they oozed on this earth. And that we are the creators of the arts and sciences, the languages, all of them, and even the religions. So we have nothing to be ashamed of, not even being captured by this animal, because when he captured us, we were in human, peaceful pursuit of living, a diversified life. He came with an inhumane criminal activity and disturbed our life. We wasn't geared for war because we are not out to destroy mankind. We are out to make more people. We are out to preserve the world and preserve our species. We are not trying to wreck, and nature, or whoever you want to call it, was good to us. It put us in the richest continent in the world, gave us the best physique, the best women. But that's when we were Africans. The trouble came when we started letting other people name us. We started following other allegiances. When we forgot that race is first. It comes before religion. It comes before politics. It comes before nationality. It's your ethnicity, your physiognomy. It takes the African to make an African. And it's going to take Africans to preserve Africans. And the African's going to have to do 180 degrees from his mythical thinking into science. And that's where we are. That's what they don't want us to do. They don't want us to be scientists. The Jews, as a Garveyite, I have a special reason to despise those criminals. Elambe alluded to it, the act that caused Mr. Garvey to go to prison and to be deported and separated from his strong base here in the United States was one Jew criminal by the name of Silverstone who stole that money, that built that case up on that ship. Then another Jew by the name of Maddox, who was the prosecuting attorney who lied like the lowest dog that ever lived on this earth in building up one of the most false, unrealistic case on Garvey. And then it was another Jew by the name of Mack that, as Lambe told the jury, man, let's get him. I mean, I got somewhere to go, but even worse than that, Maddox told him, said, it doesn't matter, white brothers who's on the jury, whether this man is guilty or not. Are you going to let the tiger go? You going to let the one man go that might arouse and educate all of those Africans, and all our criminal activities will come to a halt, and we have to go back being the natural bums that we are, because we'll be deprived of their natural resources and raw material? Or are you going to let the tiger go? But Garvey answered him, you might have caged the tiger, Cracker, but what about them cubs I put out there? And you're looking at one right here. And we're here to let the Jews know that we're not going to tolerate them misusing no African man, woman, or child on the face of this earth. And the criminal activities that they are engaging in is our intention to bring that to a halt and to raise the consciousness of our people and have them to join the human race. Don't be nothing special. Do like the rest of the people do. You have to eat. Get you an agricultural system that will make you eat whether other people want to give you some of their food or not. Put you some textile mills out there so that you don't have to wrap up in his clothes every time you don't want to be naked. Build you some houses, some factories, and other shelters to carry on your various endeavors. But most of all, develop you a big black Army, Navy, and Air Force. Because logic and verbalism is not going to change this monster. You can show him all of his fallacies. You can go into all his law books. You can show him all of the criminal act. And if you think that he's going to drop all of this wealth that he's stealing from you and crawl back into the cave and be the natural animal that he was before you got to be out of your mind. So it's better, it is good that we come together. Tony Martin spent his life, spent his money and big money publishing books on Marcus Garvey. The one man that put our total struggle into clear scientific focus. We need racial unity. We need to emancipate our race. We need to redeem our homeland. We got to build a United States of Africa. On a local level, we have to implement the Buy Black campaign. There's no way of getting out of that if you want to enter the human race. You must be the butcher, the baker, and the candlestick maker in your community like those other people are in their communities. All the other races, they make it a religious, a fetish, that wherever they're the majority population, they're going to own up to 90–95% of the commerce business life and dominate the body politics of that area. That's normal. That's natural. People directing you in any other course but that is leading you to continued slavery, continued flunkyism, continued dependency. And that's not your plight. As I started off, and these other history will tell you, you was on this earth long before anybody else in the world. You lived 1,000,000 years, and you mastered the science of survival. Nobody can teach you how to survive. You were surviving 1,000,000 years before they came on this earth. Right. And they're only copying what they saw you do in their survival. Right. The only reason you are not competing with them successfully is because the white man has a religion that the black man only uses on himself and won't use on the white man. And that is, he who can kill the most gonna have the most. Now, it's no trouble to see Harlem Hospital overcrowded with black bodies that black men and black women send there every week in the rest of the hospitals. So you are killing. And as Sister Soldier said, you just killing the wrong folks. You know? You're dying anyway. Living without freedom, living without dignity is not living anyhow. We the laughing stock of humanity. We're the only people in the world left that's not striving for real scientific nationalism, real scientific freedom, to be in charge of ourselves, to make sure that we can live not because of the white man, but in spite of him and the rest of the world, because we have it up here if we only use it. Nature blessed us with 12.5 million square miles of the richest land in the world, although it's being mismanaged and destabilized at this time. We have the African genius to straighten it up. And it is people like Tony Martin, Dr. Jeffries, Dr. Clarke, other great scholars, is to make you aware of who you are, where you came from, that you're only a duplicate of those great people, that this criminal Jew and his other Anglo-Saxon Gentile brother is criminals. They're in possession of our land, in possession of our neighborhood, possession of our minds. The mere fact that here I am, African, here you are, African, we're talking about African issues, and I'm talking you in white, in European. Something wrong there. And all that has to be corrected, but you're going to have to think about things in order to make them come about. The thought process leads to the behavior process. If you don't have nothing good on your head, you're not going to do nothing good in your behavior. And you got to recognize that you're a human being, that you're responsible for yourself, that you have proven that you can measure up. You haven't measured up over the years. Even the world respects you not for what you're doing, because you don't seem to be doing too much, but the mere fact that you can live among this homicidal maniac, you know, and come out laughing and buck dancing and doing all of the foolishness that you do, because you look better than him, and he got all the money. You're living better than most of them, because anything outside of a cave he has nostalgia, because that's where he belongs. He don't belong in other people's land. He don't supposed to have control of our resources and raw materials on a local, national, or international scale. He can't tell us what to think or what to say. To hell with him. I mean, who the hell he think he is that he gonna tell our professors what to tell our children? We the one to tell him what to tell our children. Tony Martin kept up the tradition of Marcus Garvey, and he gave us a wealth of books, one of which, as Brother Ilambe alluded to, is one that I compiled, the works of Mr. Cook's, his lectures, his writings, which is a continuation of Marcus Garvey. We called Mr. Cook's the ideological son of Marcus Garvey, the second generation, the man who kept the Garvey program alive. When all else, the white man had taken the Garvey name and pushed it in the mud, and had taken the UNIA and degraded it with a character assassination. This man here, right here in Harlem, that most of you don't know anything about, he almost single-handedly kept Mr. Garvey alive, resurrected his character, promoted Garvey Day parades every year, started the Garvey movement where he taught all of us who professed on the scene today that we know anything about Marcus Garvey. This is the gentleman that did it. And the man who made it possible for you to get it, and I hope you go out there and buy all of them out there, was Tony Martin. Not only did he promote Garvey, but many subjects concerning Africa, in the Caribbean, in the United States, in other parts of the world, in South America. He is committed to the raising the consciousness and intelligence of our people by giving them the facts of history, as well as you can always count on him to come and support any positive rally. And the Jews made a hell of a mistake this time, because we're not going to let them get off the hook. You know, after Mr. Garvey, after Mr. Tony Martin leave here, 2 weeks from today, we're going to give a rally in support of Dr. Jeffries, and we're going to keep this fire going until we raise the consciousness of our people. Till you think the Jew is squealing now, you wait till we get through with him. If he want to avoid it, he better get up off of Dr. Martin and the rest of us, pack up his criminal bag and get out of our communities, and most of all, get his sad criminal self out of the continent of Africa so that we can get what belongs to us and restore us to a normal, natural life. Thank you.
Robert Harris, African National Construction Movement. Going to move right along because we have quite a few speakers, and we want to make sure we get everybody in to give their particular perspective on how to deal with this particular problem. At this particular time, we're going to bring a brother who has been doing a great deal of work in promoting Garveyism. I first met him in 1969 when he came here from Jamaica, and he had made contact with the African nationalists. And is a brother who decided that he would take up the banner that his father was forced to surrender by, or at least by passing off the scene. The fact is that Marcus Garvey Jr., who now is the President General of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League, is revitalizing that organization as it has not been in the past. And it's for that reason that we are trying to coordinate a great deal of the activities and the tactics and strategies that we are trying to put into place so that as we go toward the next millennium, that we will be much stronger and much more assured of being victorious in our struggle against the enemy. The fact that anybody who is in the way of the forward motion of the African people is going to be in serious trouble, white or black, because that's where we are right now, or any other color. The fact is that we have a very serious position to take if we're going to really do what needs to be done. Marcus Garvey Jr. has decided that he is going to play a major role in that struggle. Will you please welcome at this time Brother Marcus Garvey Jr.
African brothers and sisters, greetings.
Amen.
Are we strong tonight?
Yes.
Are we going to get stronger tomorrow?
Yes.
And the day after?
Yes.
Good. Jews, Arabs, Chinese, all persons who seek to oppress and walk over the African, therefore beware. We are coming together. How beautiful it is to see our Muslim brothers with us, to see Rastafarian brothers with us, to see Roman Catholics with us, Presbyterians with us. Why are we here? Because somebody out there is threatening our very right to think, to inform ourselves, to educate ourselves, and to tell the truth about ourselves. This is a wonderful time to be here. Here in this world, when things appear to be the very worst for the African people that they have been for a very, very long time. But we must take hope. Now let me tell you a little story. When I went to Africa, left on December the 12th. December the 12th is an important date for some people here. Sister Viola, December the 12th. I was boarding the plane. Yes, the Air Afrique plane. Not in France, not somewhere else, but right out there at Kennedy Airport, when, after I had passed through the barrier, I was stopped by two Frenchmen who took away my garment bag. In that garment bag, you heard me talk about it on Thursday. You heard me talk, some of you heard me speak on the radio about it. December the 12th. How many months ago is that? 5 months. In that garment bag was documents of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League. There was information about our solar energy project, which was being developed by some of our members who are engineers. I'm an engineer too, but these fellows were working out of our California division. The documents were there. That book that I'm writing on the Holocaust, which throws the blame on European, Arab, and Jew, which I was taken to Africa because I know I would be inspired at Elmina Castle and at Goree to write the truth. Those documents were taken. For 5 months, they pretended they couldn't find the bag. Didn't know what happened to it. A garment bag is big like this and big like this, huh? It was tagged with my name in 2 places, but they couldn't find the bag. And yesterday, I went on Gary Bird's show. At 11:40, I said, Gary, I got to tell the family out there what happened to me, because you know we're going to litigation, we're going to war over this now. So I opened up my mouth, my big black African mouth on WLIB yesterday at 11:40. After 5 months, and by 8:15 that night, a special courier brought my garment bag, and every single thing was in it. When you have the power to inform and educate the people and to organize them behind you, all men will think twice before they seek to oppress you and to strike at you. And what we're here to do tonight is to see that we make the first steps to ensure that our brother, Professor Anthony Martin of Wellesley College, is treated with the respect and justice that he deserves. For he's an educator like Leonard Jeffries. Educators. People who educate their race and their people. And what is this charge that is being brought against Professor Tony Martin? That he did wickedly and maliciously introduce into his class at Wellesley College a terrible book called The Secret Relationship Between Blacks and Jews, which was published by the Historical Research Department of the Nation of Islam. Post Office Box 190551, Boston, Massachusetts 02119. $24.95 only. Get yourself a copy of this wicked book. Now, when did we hear in the history of the world, whether in the West or the East, that a professor does a devilish thing when he introduces a book of learning into his class? If it is bad learning and bad scholarship, then he will dissect it, and his very students who are highly intelligent will find that it is bad learning and bad scholarship. If lies are told in that book, then those lies will be unmasked. So what is the terrible thing that Professor Tony Martin did? Well, let us examine the situation, and we will think that we will get some clues as to what is bothering the Israelites, the Jews, the Israelis, the Yids, or whatever the name they go by. What is in this book? This book tells the truth of the Jewish involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. Now, I will let you into a little secret. I am an electrical engineer, not a historian. I'm also a physicist, not a historian. But of course, I did get very, very good grades when I did history, because I was very interested in the history of my people. So in West Indian and Caribbean history, I came out on top. But I'm not professionally a historian. But I know that I can go to my neighborhood library in my small town, and after 45 or 50 minutes of rummaging, I can pick up 3 books or more that detail the Jewish involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. All you have to do is to have the intelligence to translate those names like Jacob Meerschaert or Smeerschaert or David Ben Jackass or Monkey or whatever it is, and you will know that those are Jewish names. Now, if it is so easy to be done, how can it be so difficult to verify that Jews took part in the transatlantic slave trade? So there is something else behind this. And I will let you into another little secret. If you go on to do a little more research and spend a bit more effort in digging up, you'll find that the Jews were also involved in the Arab slave trade, because they were financing in the East too. The Jews were in the Arab countries as financiers. When the slaves were brought to the slave markets in those Arab towns, Jews were there as merchants, because they had subscribed the monies, they had financed the ventures, just as they did in the West. So the Jew is a little unique in, well, he's not unique, the Arab is the same thing too. But they are double dippers in the slave trade. They are in the Western slave trade, they are also in the Eastern slave trade. And I know that Professor Tony Martin didn't put too much emphasis on that. But we have to explore that other part of it too, and throw it in their faces. Now we come to the great problem. We have a lot of people here tonight, but I'm going to give you the facts that I have to give you. Reason why Mr. Jew, Mr. Israeli, opposes so vociferously Jewish involvement and guilt in the slave trade. And also notice the teaching of the African origin of civilization. Number one reason, R-E-P-A-R-A-T-I-O-N-S, Reparations! There's not a Jew in the world who wants to pay reparations to the African race, for the Jew loves money above all things. No, sir. If the Jew has been involved, then like the Gentile and the Arab, he must pay his reparations. Now, the Jew has a certain vulnerability. For in all of the African countries in Africa and the Caribbean, the Jew has extensive holdings, having been at the peak of exploitation of our societies for many, many years. So we have a lot that we can nationalize in the Caribbean and throughout Africa that is Jewish. Now, do you understand one compelling reason, my brothers and sisters? We say we must have reparations for the murder of our ancestors and kinsmen, for the torture and imprisonment of them, for the work that we did for which no wages was paid, for the property that we were forced to leave behind in Africa, for we were not a naked or penniless people in our motherland of Africa, and also for the terrible cruelty that was imposed upon us by the slave traders, the slave merchants, and all those who took part in the slave trade. Reparations will come up to trillions and trillions of dollars to be paid by, I repeat, by European or Aryan, if you prefer that name, Arab and Jew. All those who were responsible must pay. Now let us look at the situation. Another situation, we go back much further in history now. Why these Jews are so sensitive about an African origin of civilization. Why does the little lady, as you will read in that text, get so hysterical when it is said that Africans gave civilization to the Jews who then passed it on to the Romans? As a schoolboy, I did Latin, and I remember well the sentence, Pliny the Elder, ex Africa semper aliquid novi. Something new is always coming out of Africa. If the Roman could say so 1400 years ago, if the Roman could say so 1400 years ago, how dare this Jewish wench deny our primacy in civilization and culture? But there is something that beats down on these Jews. Now let us look at our great pharaonic ancestors. We know how black and beautiful they were. You see, if we are the first man and the first woman, if we created the first civilizations, if we were enlightened when all else was in darkness, then we, black people, were the pharaohs. Then Moses was in our house, in the house of the Pharaoh. How could he be unrecognized if he were white and leprous? He had to be black and beautiful like we were. Now, if Moses and the rest of the so-called Jews or Arabus or whatever they were called at the time were black, then who are these white people in Crown Heights and elsewhere who are calling themselves Jews today? And where is their promised land? It was never their land. Now you see the other reason why they have to beat down the fact that we were the first in civilization and that we taught civilization to the Jew, to the Greeks, and then to the Romans. But the work of our immortal genius Sheikh Anta Diop shows clearly the truth. Oh yes, it's now out. The scholarship is out. But these idiots who you see on ABC, these so-called scholars and learned white men and women, have never read the works of Sheikh Anta Diop. Or if they read them, they turn their minds away from it. But it is a very powerful force, this fact. Moses was black, so David is black, so Jesus is black. Huh? So where is Mr. Israelite? because the white people were converted to the Jewish faith, as our brother Elambe were telling you, in the 9th century. If you want to find original Jews, look for the Falashas. Notice how they brought them from Ethiopia over to Israel. What an anxiety they had to get them over there to validate their claims to the promised land, the Holy Land. And there's a third point I want to make. It is a psychological point made in the mass. It is this, that Jews have a vested interest in the United States and elsewhere in keeping the African race at the bottom and in a position of tutelage and subjugation. If the Africans are kept weak and divided, then when the racist Aryan whites get into one of their blood surges, you know, every now and then the white Aryan people of Western Europe get into this blood mood where they have to beat up on other people and commit their acts of genocide. Then they will turn naturally against us. We will be weak and we are well differentiated in color. We cannot pass anywhere, not even in the night. So that the Africans become a buffer race or buffer group against Aryan hostility in the United States and elsewhere. Then there's the fear that a powerful and united Africa, an Africa in which the African would be marching all over his country with military power, with unity and purpose, would nationalize Jewish holdings, which are all over there. We know the immense wealth in South Africa that's in the hands of the Jews, the Oppenheimers and others. So we remember, and we must not forget, the Jewish aid, the aid of Israel to South Africa, which has helped them to develop atomic weapons and other military techniques which are designed solely and entirely for the purpose of keeping our people in the southland of Africa in subjugation. African brothers and sisters, we have to be strong. We have to be resolute. But we have to condemn those Negroes who are going on television and who don't have the manhood to stand up in the face of the white man and say, Professor Leonard Jeffries was right, he spoke truth. Don't hide behind any damn amendment, because the white man has accepted that the amendment allows Jeffries to speak. But what he's saying, that Jeffries is lying. And as I told you, any damn fool can go to a library and spend 45 minutes to an hour there and find out that Professor Leonard Jeffries is telling God's truth. African brothers and sisters, one God, one aim, one destiny, all power to the African people.
Getting hot tonight. Brother Marcus Garvey Jr. At this particular point, we're going to hear another analysis in defense of Dr. Tony Martin. And this particular analysis will be coming from somebody who is a comrade and a dear friend. We struggled together for over 20 years. We argue, we fight, debate over issues, but we're in the same trench. And this particular person is one who is known not to bite their tongue. And I had some people, I must have gave a code. As a person who many of you know, has been involved for quite some time, and right now has been doing some very, very important international work, taking up not only where Malcolm left off on the international question, but also where Garvey introduced when, again, that Dr. Martin pointed out in Race First, when the Persian delegation was contacted at the League of Nations to put forth some defense of the predicament of Africans, or the struggle of African people. That was the first time that an international agency or body, the predecessor of the United Nations, the League of Nations, was used to try to bring our problem to the international dimension. And right now, Sister Viola Plummer of the December 12th movement and also of the Harriet Tubman Fannie Lou Hamer Collective has been very much involved with that. The last 4 years have been going back and forth to Geneva, where the United States government is backed up against the wall for the first time. They're about to be brought up on charges of violation of the human rights of Africans based on the work that the December 12th International Secretariat has done. Stuff was not done in no newspaper. It wasn't done in no television. We take a lot of hits because people don't see things that we're doing in the media, but that's not the way things are done. You know, I mean, sometimes you have to realize that, as Gil Scott Heron pointed out many years ago, the revolution will not be televised. It will not be televised. And it will bear its best work when it is done that way. Some people who love to hog the limelight, they love to be on stage. And then some of us are more interested in doing the work. Will you please welcome one of those people, Sister Viola Plummer.
Please. I think Dr. Marcus Garvey Jr., certainly following Brother Harris, began to put us in the mood for some of the remarks that I would like to make. I would like to begin by saying we want to switch our vocabulary in two instances. First instance I want to talk about is in the middle of the bear meeting. Then I want to talk about switching our vocabulary when we talk about civil rights or human rights. But first, let's talk about the bear meeting. My mother used to work for Jews. She was a domestic. She worked from 6 o'clock in the morning till 7 or 8 o'clock at night for Jews. And one of the things that she always told us was that they were always confused about the meeting they were in. She said when she went into their house, they thought she came to a prayer meeting where they were holy and they had everything that she needed to live. But in fact, she had gone into a bear meeting. And she said their confusion that between a bear meeting and a prayer meeting enabled her to exact as much reparations for her work as she possibly could. Because the bear meeting was the fight meeting, and the prayer meeting was the prayer meeting. And she said, when you go to a bear meeting, and this is what I mean by changing our vocabulary, when you go to a bear meeting, you go on the offense, y'all, not the defense. We are not here to defend Lynn, Dr. Martin, okay? We are not here to defend anybody. We are here on the offensive. We are control the bear meeting. And that our control, yeah, it's slow. I'm telling y'all. Sometimes I think y'all ain't gonna come to the bear meeting. But we do. We get there. After the continued insults, after the massive amount of attacks on our very humanity, after we try to negotiate, after we try to legislate, after we accept what they say is educate or education, after all of that, they remain thinking that we will never take charge at the bear meeting. But those of you who came tonight came because you are finally in charge of the bear meeting. So with that, I welcome you, because we are on the offensive. You see, the offensive is the truth. Pure and simple truth. And as long as we tell the truth to the people, we take charge of the bear meeting. We take charge of the bear meeting, y'all. The process is very important, because those people like me and Dr. Clarke and Lombe and Father Lucas and lots of other brothers and sisters who've been doing this for so many years, we got to speed the process up, y'all. Offense puts you in a different posture. Offense prepares you to take charge in the real sense of the word. And that's the way we have to think. We are no longer going to allow our humanity to be attacked because someone, Marcus, is afraid we're going to get to the bottom line and say it is time to pay the dues. No longer can we avoid that. That's where we got to go. And brothers and sisters, be clear. They are not going to pay because we convince them with our words, because we elect enough Negroes, Jews, Gentiles, women, you name it, to whatever job they get, be it mayor or president. They're not going to give up the money. Y'all with that? They are not going to give up the money. They are not going to relinquish the control over the richest continent in the world. They are not going to grant 40 million Africans in the United States freedom. They're not going to do it. Power concedes nothing without a demand. It never did, and it never will. And in the bear meeting, brothers and sisters, you got to come to fight the bear. You got to come to fight the bear. And none of those things that we talked about earlier is strong enough weapons to fight him. If we don't think revolution is the answer, then we miss the concept, and we in the prayer meeting. We in the prayer meeting because They maim, kill, murder, rape without a second thought. The Iraqis had an idea that they would not continue to accept the dictates of George Bush around the oil export in the Middle East. They had an idea that they would charge that. And these bloodsuckers killed 200,000 men, women, and children. Understand, they're clear about the Bear meeting. Clear about the Bear meeting. So when we talk about the offensive, be clear that reparations will come when we are prepared to fight them to take it back. Only then. Surely, with the kind of scholars that we have, Dr. Clarke, Dr. Martin, and Elombe Braff, y'all. We are not stupid. We have learned over the 400 years. You gotta fight on all fronts. What is absolutely necessary, though, is that you understand where you're going in the fight. That you do not think that the particular battle is the Bear meeting. The particular battle is the step toward the Bear meeting, y'all. And in that regard, we in the December 12th movement learned that lesson. We learned that lesson and said, right now, what is on the agenda that we can strike a blow to humiliate, embarrass, and send into the wealth of lies that only the United States government can create. What can we do to push that? Well, they say that this is a democracy. They say that you all have the opportunity to do what you will. You have a constitution, and it will protect you. If you're an academician, it will allow you to say what you want to say. But we reserve the right to tell the world it is untrue. You see? That's democracy. When crackers control everything, and let you use it, that is democracy. So we said, bet, let us use some of this democracy. And so we went to Brother Malcolm, who summed up Garvey, Bill Patterson, Du Bois, when he said we've got to internationalize our struggle. We've got to take our struggle to the international arena. And brothers and sisters, stay with me, because we are not talking about going to the United Nations, winning the Bear meeting. Y'all hear that? We are talking about internationalizing the struggle to use the instrument of democracy against the Democrats and the Republicans, because they the democracy. We are talking about democratizing America. We are saying to the world that for 400 years, Africans that were enslaved in this country continue to be so. We are saying to the world that these bloodsuckers have no moral authority on any issue. That they cannot talk about Cuba violates people's human rights. They cannot call Libya a terrorist nation. They cannot dictate that Angola should have elections and they finance Jonas Savimbi. They cannot talk about Panama and the Sudan and Nigeria and Mozambique in terms of political prisoners and incarcerate Matulu Shakur for 60 years and put Abu Jamal on death row. They cannot do that. There is a double standard. And so we say to the United Nations in all of their protocol, using all of their words, dressed up real nice, no t-shirts, the whole bit, we take it right to them and say, you can't have it both ways. That you cannot allow the United States to reign supreme in this body with the kind of human rights violations that it has. You cannot do it. And of course it goes on, the United States controls the purse strings. But they get more intimidated with every year that we go there. So much so that the first time we went there, the delegation was Lily White. Lily White, Morris Abram was in charge of the delegation. And then there was 5 or 6 other little people from the State Department. The third year, second or third year, here comes this colored person. And this colored person is number 2 in the delegation. This colored person is the floor person. And you know what his stock in trade is? Only in the United States could a man like me achieve this position. I was born by the river in a rundown shack. And my mother and father worked so hard. And that I went to college and law school and international affairs school, and now I am number 2, peddling murder, destabilization, the killing of children. And those were my words when he finished his. And his conclusion was only in the United States, and every delegate in the assembly hall who didn't smile outright bowed their heads in embarrassment for him. The Africa group, the group of Africans that are there, when the meeting was over and he made this ridiculous statement, came to us and said that Kenneth Blackwell should say thank you to the December 12th movement for his job. Secondly, we have been able to get what's called a special rapporteur, a special investigator, to investigate racism in the United States and Europe. So that part of the offense, and let me do this quickly, that part of the offense has just begun. And we need y'all. We need your help. There will be at the back of the room a sheet that's a survey sheet. And what it does is to ask you whether or not any of your human rights have been violated. The denial of housing, health care, arbitrary detention, education, anything. Put it on the paper. Name, case, and leave it there. Or there's a post office box. Mail it to us. We need that. Secondly, on Malcolm's birthday in Washington, D.C., we are going to hold a human rights rally and demonstration. And we're not going to no dead crackers. We're not going to Lincoln and Washington and none of them others. And see, Clinton is dead too, y'all. He just walks around. Okay, be clear. Be clear, no power. He has zero power. So, we're going to the southeast section of Washington, D.C. because it is there in terms of the seat of human rights violations that is most expressive in the heart of where democracy is supposed to be. We need y'all with that too. Buses will be leaving from Manhattan, 125th Street and Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard, in Brooklyn from Fulton and Flatbush, in Jamaica from Jamaica Queens, from Liberty Avenue and Guy R. Brewer Boulevard. And all we are attempting to do is to change the vocabulary. We no longer want our people to talk about civil rights. That's over. They killed Dr. King, they killed that myth. Okay? Civil rights, did anybody ever ask any of you whether y'all wanted to be a citizen of the United States? Did they? Because I don't remember, I've been here 75 years, they ain't never asked me. So I don't know whether they ask anybody. So civil rights for us is not the issue. So our offensive right now is to change the vocabulary. From now on, we talk human rights. From now on, the Bear meeting is labeled human rights. Y'all with that? I didn't hear you though. What it is. What it is. What it is. What it is. Straight ahead, Dr. Martin, Dr. Clarke, Dr. Jeffries, we in charge of the Bear meeting. Freedom or death.
While we're getting ready to bring up the fountainhead of all of this, as far as the history is concerned, but I want to, before I do that, I just want to tell you one thing. We want you to attend another piece of history on Sunday at St. John's Cathedral, the Cathedral Church of St. John the Divine. On Sunday at 2 p.m., there will be a national memorial service for the late Oliver Tambo. the person who was more responsible for organizing the ANC during that interim period when everybody was in jail, and who got very little coverage on what he did. Instrumental in bringing peace among the various factions, various liberation movements in Angola by putting people in contact with other folks so that SWAPO could actually take root there to fight South Africa. A brother that was very accessible when we had him here a couple of times, and who it seems to be like a whiteout in the press about this memorial. And because what we feel is going to happen is that many white people, progressive quotation marks, will be there, and we want to make sure that the black community does show up. It's a national memorial. Brother paid a very heavy price in the struggle. That's the reason why he got a stroke in the first place and why he died. When I saw him last year in Ghana and we talked, he was coming on a little bit better. I saw him in Johannesburg in February. But we could see that, you know, the leadership and the elders they're moving on. And we want you to actually pay that respect to this brother who just 2 weeks earlier, he and his wife, Adelaide, were the ones who closed Chris Haney's eyes when he was laying there on the ground, splattered in blood. And when they would put him into the ambulance or the hearse, they were the ones who closed his eyes, not knowing that in 2 weeks they too, or at least like Oliver Tambo, would be out of here. So we ask you to go up there on Sunday at 2 p.m. at 112th Street and Amsterdam Avenue and participate in that particular memorial service. When we talk about historians, when we talk about people who put the foundation here, and I'm talking about from a Pan-Africanist viewpoint that has been involved as an activist and, you know, dealt with the chronological stages of African development on the continent, in the Caribbean, and in this particular country, there is an elder that a lot of us go to, because this particular person has explored all the ideological currents. And he says now that at his age, he doesn't worry about offending anybody. We had to struggle with him sometimes, but we had to listen to him because we respect him and love him dearly. And because we know that his worldview of Africa is one that we share. He's a brother who understands what the dimensions of Garveyism is all about. And he's run afoul of many people who some feel are, and some of us even feel, have been comrades, but have a deficiency in understanding the revolutionary dynamics of African people worldwide. This brother is an elder. And the thing that you have to look for when you start to read about these attacks on Dr. Jeffries or on Tony Martin, that when you read, find it, particularly from these Negro professional academics, or as Brother Samoy Marsman calls them, academins. These black academins, all of them, when you start to see what they're saying, they end up going beyond just, you know, talking about Dr. Jeffries. Next thing, they're taking swipes at Dr. Clarke, Dr. Ben. And you get an idea that what they are against is the whole idea of African history per se. They're trying to destroy the level of knowledge our people have come to because they had wiped African history out of our dimensions. People like the late Dr. Seifert, who many people never even talked about, and even his wife, Mrs. Seifert. You don't even hear these names. Willis Huggins' name, from African civilization past, is just wiped away. And we have to remember that Arthur Schomburg, one of the biggest contributions he made was that he was also a historian. Because the idea of history, and because like Schomburg got interested in history because when he was in Puerto Rico, they told him that black people had none. The same thing that fool Levin was trying to say a few minutes ago. But the person where we go to, and we always had to go and say, you got to just come over here. But there's no problem with this because we just made one call, left a message. And when he heard that, of course, that Tony was in trouble, he knew that he had to come and help to straighten this out. And so it gives me great pleasure to once again be able to bring to you the African historian emeritus, the brother who lays out the history from ancient time until today, Dr. John Henrik Clarke.
Thank you very much. I knew Tony Martin as a student. Never thought I'd have to defend him, and I don't think it's necessary to defend him now. The focal point of my remarks will be on a neglected aspect of our struggle, the consequences of the failure to call for the restoration of the state. The state is the container of a people's culture, of people's aspirations, of people's hope. One thing oppression will do to a people, one thing conquest will do for a people, it will destroy the concept of the state as they once knew it. It will destroy the culture as they once knew it. It will make them slaves to someone else's culture, someone else's concept, someone else's image of God, someone else's concept of how to dress. Now the fear among blacks, and the one thing we have to look at is that why is it that Jewish people who were killed wholesale by other white people are not standing up to those people? Why is it you've got 350 hate groups in America, have a Jewish Defense League who won't lift a finger at even one of them? Why are they targeting us? They want and need an easy victory. They understand something that they think we are beginning to understand. They want a state legitimately. And they know that you cannot take a religion and make it into a state. There is no Catholic state, there is no Protestant state, there is no Baptist state. And they know that legitimately everything they've had in the world that they call a state, including Israel, has been stolen property. have not only had the state, clusters of states, multiplicities of states, but when we were at our best in self-contained states, and the people who would later emerge to join that faith came into Africa. No clear religion, no clear language, no clear culture. And when they left Africa, they had all three. Now, what is the origin of their being? These people are in revolt against their cultural parents. And they think their cultural parents don't know who they are. Now, we deal with those in Europe in a separate way because the people in Europe are converts. There's enough literature on it other than the 13th tribe to read. Now, they have survived in the world by bargaining their talent off to different power forces in the world, having no permanent loyalty but permanent interest in that which shall. They need an easy victory, and they're trying to get that victory at our expense. Did they ever, have you ever seen them stand up to a German and call him an anti-Semitic? We have to look at the different people who have played a role in programming us in our mind into a concept that we never rule the state. Look at American sociology, look at anthropology, look at the racist disciplines in the schools of America. Look at history and how it is being taught to make the world think that it waited in darkness for Europeans to bring the light. Then ask you the question, why is it that at this juncture in history, a people who were almost destroyed because of their ethnic being are the new super white supremacists? What games are now being played at our expense? Now we have to go back and understand what went wrong with the Civil Rights Movement, with the Caribbean Federation Movement, with the African Independence Movement. Why didn't we bring into being the framework of a state that could restore and call back the concept of civilization, culture, and the rule of a state as we previously ran states before the first European had a shoe or lived in a house that had a window? Why then did we, so alien from the concept of the state as we originally ruled the state, why did we become imitators of the oppressor state, therefore building not one single African state in Africa, the Caribbean islands, or no other place? They know that we are trapped by concepts that we did not create. It is like wearing clothes that do not fit you and shoes that pinch your feet. Until we get up enough nerve to throw off concepts that's alien to our progress, we can let opportunists, races come and call us anti-Semitic. But I dare you explain to me what in the hell is a Semitic? then who is the other half of, if it's Semitic, indicating that's half of one and half of the other, what's that other half? Are we dealing with the people who are mulattoes? What then is their claim for land outside of Europe when they were converts in Europe? Look at ancient texts. You won't find the word Jew. The word Jew is of European origin. Then why don't we read their history as they have written their history? Why don't we understand the nature of the Arab slave trade and understand the collaboration between the Arabs and the Jews in the Eastern slave trade, in the slave trade in general, in the South American slave trade? They have never had any appreciable mercy for us as a people. Now, I admire the book, and I think good use should be made of the book, The Secret Relationship Between the Africans and the Jews. I would like to see a similar piece of competent research done on the Arab slave trade. If you're a Muslim, you do not have to leave Islam in order to take on the Arabs. They are a minority within Islam, and a corrupt minority at that. If you're a Christian, you don't have to leave the church to take on the corruption of Christianity. You don't have to leave religion to take on the fact that all organized religion, there's not one exception, are handmaidens to oppression. There's not one exception in all the world. Look at the Hindu religion. They create the concept of untouchability. How can another human being be untouchable? And how can you say you praise a God who is kind and merciful, and you've declared another human being less than human? Look at the Christian justification for the slave trade, for the Atlantic slave trade. Look at the Arab justification for the Eastern slave trade. The people we know as Jews are trying to impress the West by trying to outrage the races. And they're getting points at our expense. And we don't know how to confront them because they do not want us to ever claim our rightful place in the chronology of the history of the world. And once we claim that rightful place, we're going to claim some of the things they think they did. We are going to look at African communal societies, and we're going to understand that Karl Marx told us nothing new. We didn't dogmatize it, we just lived it out. And that the people who formalized Christianity told us nothing new. We had it 3,000 years before they formalized it and dogmatized it around a character called Jesus Christ. I'm not saying this makes it good or bad, but when we approach a way of life, instead of writing books and challenging people and enslaving people in the name of it, we just live it out. We don't proclaim, I am my brother's keeper, because if you got to proclaim it, I feel you don't even mean it. We just keep it. If people understand, and if we understand our senior position in the world, we will change our condition and change our position and subsequently change the condition of the world. We will not enter any debate between capitalism and communism. We won't even enter the debate. We will take what we need from either one of them, throw what we do not need in the garbage can, and march down the road to a higher humanity and to a higher civilization. All social orders must rest with taking care of the welfare of the people. All social orders must rest. This is where you start. Booker T. Washington wrote a book, most people never read it, called The Man Furthers Down, dealing with the working class of Europe. Now he's terribly misunderstood, as every person that comes among us are misunderstood, because we understand our great people at cocktail parties. One cocktail, graduate school. Got your PhD in knowledge of Malcolm X. One cocktail, you're an authority. Yet you do not understand the nature of one of his last great speech, Message to the Grassroots, the land question. Land is the basis of nation. That in all African societies, land could not be bought or sold. It was the common property of all people. Now this goes beyond Karl Marx. Now he invented, I'm using the word advisor, invented a class structure that was European, not Africa to Africa. Africa had a structure, but not a class structure. Everything in Africa that can be called a class structure is something engineered from the outside, something practiced mostly by Western educated Africans, European oriented. Africa has always had a status system. But this did not give you any more than the next person. Your house was not bigger than the next person. But what did it give you? Status in the society. The chief royal drummer had a decorative door on his house. When you pass his house, you know this is a man of distinction. He beats the drums for the king. But he ain't got no more money than you. When you live in a society that is communal and socialist before someone invented the word and spoiled it, you would understand Europe has given the world nothing new, and that every idea that has come out of Europe is meant to facilitate Europeans' domination over the world. That means every idea, because they have in their mind that they have the right to dominate the world under any guise. That doesn't invalidate socialism, but it should make you suspicious of their interpretation of it. They sold it out one weekend. "75 years, everybody, oh, get that big boogaboo called the Russians. Oh, get the red under the bed." One weekend, gone. I did not, after this terrible betrayal of the working class of Russia, I did not stop being a socialist. I became a better one, but more suspicious of those from Europe as the phony ones. I know that if you're going to build a society, it must be rooted in the interests of the people. That you're going to have to take care of people, that your real strength is going to have to be with people. That you're going to have to teach people their history and how they relate to the history of the world and in all people. Now back to Tony Martin's case, that is not unusual, partly set in motion when this lady discovered that the students approved of Dr. Ben's speech. Now what did Dr. Ben's speech set in motion? What made her so angry? He is claiming something which, because of their sick ego, they said they gave the world. They got to have Egypt, though Egypt existed before they existed. Then you have to ask the question, why would you leave Europe and build the most enduring civilization in human history before you build a shoe in Europe or a house with a window? Why would you come from under all of that ice, go to a warm climate, build a great civilization, go back under that ice, spend 2,000 years before you write anything in Europe that resembles a book? Once you understand that, they're trying to cover up the greatest sham in history.